Hello and welcome to this live class. My name's Ashley. I'll be hosting this class today on understanding discipline and grievance in the workplace. Now, this session is loosely based on Unit 314 in the Level 3 qualification specification. And the aim of today's session is to give you a breakdown as to what's needed within your assignment, and also to give you some hints and tips as to go about getting the top marks and the higher grade within this session. Okay, so let's get started with the aim. So the main aim is to give you an explanation of the legal aspects, and hopefully you'll gain an understanding of the organisational policies that relate to discipline within the workplace. Also, we will be describing how to monitor discipline in the workplace so it's effective and so it's fair as well. So let's start by considering, what discipline's for. Managing people can be a demanding job in any workplace. Some industries more than other, but it can be a demanding job. And it comes with, an array of responsibilities. So when dealing with unfair treatment of, in a workplace, prevention is better than cure. So having standards and code of practice in place will allow for, a solid employment, solid employee relationships, and a happy workforce all in all, really. So it's important to be able to understand why discipline is important, not just for you, but for your employees, but for the organisation as a whole. Now, I've provided a couple of definitions here, and it's Pilgrim and Corbridge's definitions, and their book, that they talk a lot about human resources and employee engagement, but I really like that their definition, I believe, is more relatable than the Oxford Dictionary or whatever. So it states that constructive action instigated by management against an employee who fails to meet reasonable and legitimate expectations in terms of performance, conduct, or adherence to rules. So this really does break down that, there is there's a code of conduct, and usually on induction, the employee and the employer, when they're going through the induction process, they'll be provided with policies and procedures within that workplace in order to be able to guide them on what's right and wrong in that organisation. So policies and standards relating to HR, they need to be fair, they need to be consistent, and they need to be in line with the law. And then, if them guides are there, then people are less likely to, go for, gross misconduct, or to, underperform in certain ways, because they'll know what the standards of what is expected of them. Now, some people misunderstand the difference between discipline and grievance, so I thought it might be fitting to provide a definition of grievance as well. And it's more about, being able to know who's there, and who you can go to if you have a problem. But again, Pilgrim and Corbridge define it as a formal expression of a perceived dissatisfaction or injustice that an employee feels towards an employer. But it doesn't necessarily always need to be an employer. The grievance could be to a fellow colleague or another manager, or it could even be against the HR manager, because they're not dealing with a disciplinary procedure as they should. So yeah, consider the difference between them both and try not to get them confused within this assignment. Okay. So let's talk a little bit more about the procedure. So we know that there needs to be a disciplinary process, but the procedure that needs to be followed is, it should be in place. It should be available and public for everyone to see within the organisation, and it should usually be shown to a new employee when they start. So the disciplinary procedures should be in place to allow for a positive organisational culture and a guideline for the code of conduct by that employee. Many potential disciplinary or grievance issues might be able to be resolved informally with like a little quiet word here or there, but if not, then the procedure should be followed. So a disciplinary procedure, it aims to maintain standards within the organisation, and realistically, you know, a manager that doesn't follow the disciplinary procedure equally with every employee, you know, should be disciplined themselves. So the grievance procedure, so employers are required in the written statements of terms and conditions of maybe their contract to inform the new member of staff or any staff members of who to go to if they have a grievance at all. So that's a legal, that's a legal requirement by ACAS, and we'll talk a bit more about ACAS in a minute. But employers should have procedures that comply with ACAS, especially in relation to grievance. So I've noted down here it provides a structure for those to be dealt with fairly and steadily, and it avoids significant problems. It also allows employees to know that there's support there and they know who to go to if they do have a grievance. Because, you know, if they didn't know who to go to, if they had a grievance or a problem or an issue, or, you know, it could end up being that they've got work-related stress, which could lead to mental health problems. So it's always important to be able to, you know, let people know instantly when they first start what the grievance procedure is. So let me tell you a little bit more about ACAS. So ACAS are an advisory body. They're funded by the government, well, mostly funded by the government for some of the services. So some of the services are free and some of them are, you know, you have to pay for. But firstly, it stands for arbitration, advisory, conciliation, arbitration service. So what that basically means is they are there when things go wrong. They're an advisory body that are there to assist as like a third party, and they're good to deal with disputes that employers and employees might have, or training within the workplace. But basically the function is to allow you to understand best practice and policies, and they have a guide for writing policies in relation to discipline and grievance. They can help with conflict resolution, and they are also there to, you know, adhere to any sort of employee rights. So the services that they provide on the left, mostly early conciliation, collective conciliation, arbitration, and mediation are funded, but they can provide specific advice and support for organisations and training, which needs to be paid for as a separate amount. They also provide guidance and workshops and focus groups, and can come out to the workplace as well, which I think is, you know, it's good for organisations that are maybe restructuring or looking at, you know, trying to create more of a positive working culture as well. So let's talk a little bit about what the differences are. So early conciliation is where they will talk and guide people on and maybe make legal agreements on and guidance on an issue or a problem. The collective conciliation is where they will, you know, talk to maybe a group that are unhappy with a specific situation. Arbitration is when a third party might come in to help with a decision on a specific case or tribunal. And mediation is when a third party talks to both sides, maybe in a dispute, usually about, you know, working conditions. So it might be, the how long that they're working, or the times that they're working, or it might be that they want flexible working and it's being rejected 5 times, but somebody else has got flexible working in the workplace and they're trying to figure out why that's fair. So there's a number of different reasons why ACAS would be useful, but for me, and when I've used it mostly as management, is when looking at writing the actual policies, amending the policies to adapt to different situations, or new regulations that are out there as well. So let us think about now the disciplinary procedure and the stages of the disciplinary procedure. Now, as I said before, first and foremost, you might want to just have a quiet word with a member of staff, say if they're underperforming, they're not meeting the KPIs every 3 months that you're having a review with them, that they're not coming in on time, their performance that isn't up to standard. Then you might want to give them a verbal warning and say, if the performance isn't up to standard by the next review, then you will be going on to a first written warning. Then when you get to that point and the reviews come across again, you've seen that, they've been coming in late all the time and they're not performing, then you might want to give them the first written warning and inform them that they may have a final written warning. And then, that might, and you say, if this still is happening within 3 months, then you will be going through the dismissal stage. So it's important to inform your staff members, and usually within the procedure there will be a typical amount of days that you've got to inform them of the disciplinary. If there's going to be a disciplinary hearing, for example, in some workplaces they have a disciplinary hearing and the first written warning, in some they don't until the final written warning, in some they have a hearing within the verbal written warning, and you've always got the opportunity to appeal any sort of disciplinary steps or stages. If someone gives you a verbal warning for underperforming, obviously that's going to go on your HR records, but you might be able to say, well, this, that, and this is the reason why I'm underperforming. And it might be a training issue, it might be a software issue, it might be that the internet's going down every week and it's affecting your targets or your scores. So you can say, well, I would like someone to investigate further on this because I don't feel like I should have got this verbal written warning. And you always, you've always got the option to do that. Then the misconduct, serious misconduct is, obviously it is serious. It's something that could get you quickly dismissed, but gross misconduct is something that will get you instantly dismissed. Now, usually within your employee handbook, or you starter pack when you first, or even just the organization's handbook, there will be usually clear points. So an example could be if you share a customer's information, that would probably be instant dismissal through gross misconduct. In some places, if you pick up a mobile phone and start talking in, say, like a call center, for example, that could be gross misconduct. If you abuse another member of staff, or that, or breach confidentiality about a specific situation. If, for example, you were dealing with patients, then that could be gross misconduct. So there are a number of different things that could be gross misconduct. Serious misconduct could be, sharing information about the organization, maybe that you don't like this and that about the organization on Facebook or social media. That could be serious misconduct, or that could be classed as gross misconduct. It depends what organization that you work for and their disciplinary procedure, process and policy. So it's important to remember that not everybody's is the same, but they should be in accordance with the ACAS standards. Okay, so the disciplinary hearing itself, there are a couple of different stages, but quite generically, I'm just going to talk about what needs to be thought about. So obviously awareness before any disciplinary hearing happens, and whether that's in relation to the verbal warning, written warning, or final warning, or the misconduct in any way. Investigations should be, you should be able to investigate and, hear both sides of the story. Often is the case that you will get, a statement from the appropriate people. You might need witnesses. You might need to go and find out more information in relation to the performance. You might want to get records up. So you need to have some information. As a manager, if you're conducting the hearing, you need to gather the right information in order to be able to figure out what the situation is. So awareness, okay? So firstly, you want to be aware of the problem or the issue. You want to be able to clarify that problem or issue, and you might even want to send a questionnaire or, a couple of questions out to the person saying, what's the problem or issue? What do you think you did right? What do you think you did wrong? How do you think you could overcome this? And then preparing back for the interview by getting all of this paperwork together, choosing the location, notifying the people that need to attend. And that might be not just you and the person that you're disciplining. It might be a HR representative. It might be a line manager or a supervisor, or it might even be a colleague. And each person that's attending, if a person's attending a disciplinary hearing for being disciplined for gross misconduct or for being having a written warning, they might want to be accompanied by a colleague or a trade union representative, and they have the right to do that. So if you set a date for a hearing and the person who they want to accompany can't attend, you should be trying to cater to their needs, basically. So know who's going to be there, and make sure you examine your expectations to what you're going to be hearing within there as well. So the interview or the hearing itself, you need to be able to state the purpose and the procedure, question what the individual, listen actively to what the person's saying, and record anything, because if it is just an initial written warning, you might want to keep that on their records in case the incident or the issue happens again. So then you can pull up that for basically purposes of the following interview as well. So it's important to be able to give the individual written notice of the date, the time, and the place, and usually give them between 2 and 5 working days. Obviously, that depends on your policy. It depends on your procedure. It might be that you give people 2 weeks notice of a disciplinary hearing. I mean, to be completely honest with you, I don't think that you should drag a disciplinary hearing out, because obviously the person being disciplined is going to be stewing on what's going to be happening. So the sooner you can get a disciplinary hearing done and out the way, in my experience, getting it done and out the way and getting it, I mean, obviously you need to agree on that date and time and place and have time to be able to interview and gather the evidence that you need. It's just important to be able to try and get it done, because hopefully it will just be laying out the law and what needs to be done in the code of conduct of that individual. And if you can do that earlier, then they can go away and maybe have more training, or maybe have a little bit more guide or support, or maybe they might tell you in the disciplinary hearing then they've got really a lot of personal problems that are going on that are impacting on their work. So it might just be that you're supporting them a little bit more than that. In the past, I've had somebody whose performance management was really, really going down, and I gave them a written warning. And then when I gave them the final written warning, they informed me that somebody had a serious illness in their family, and the mind just wasn't really on the job because they were caring for them at home. So I agreed with senior management to give them a little bit more flexibility on their hours, so they could care for the individual in the morning, be able to come in and work, and make sure that they can, if they needed to go to appointments with that person, that they could do that. And it's sometimes just opening up that communication that can allow, both people to be happy and people to have work-life balance, and also to make sure that everyone's aware of each other's circumstances, really. And the main purpose of this hearing is to review evidence and enable the employee to respond to allegations. And they might respond in a way that then you may need to go away and do further investigation to then come back and have another meeting regarding the disciplinary hearing. That could happen. It might be that you go away, do further investigations, do further training with the individual, and then just have another a review, a one-to-one review with them. It might be that you might need to just give them further support. So instead of having a 3-monthly review, you're giving them 1-monthly reviews to be able to set more specific key performance indicators for that individual. So, it depends on the situation, obviously, but adjournment might happen. You might need to reevaluate, and you also might need to reconvene. So always bear that in mind. So one of the learning outcomes asks you to specifically talk about employment law and policies within the workplace and link them, just demonstrating the link between. So remember and bear in mind about employment laws, and also remember contract laws as well. So you don't really need to go that much into detail about this, but you might have members of staff that are subcontractors that you want to discipline, but it's difficult too because you don't actually have the right to do that. So you need to maybe work up the organizational structure and figure out who has the right to do that. It might be that they are agency staff and you need to pass on the concerns or the issue or the problem to an agency that's got them there with you. But if somebody is underperforming and you want to have a quiet word with them and you say, okay, following our code of conduct, you will be disciplined within this area of work, or you will be disciplined for this, that, or the other. If they say, well, you can't do that because you're not my direct supervisor or manager or whatever, then you need to be able to inform them that this will be the process that you will go down if you need to. Might even be important that if they're a worker and not an employee, showing them the organizational handbook and saying, well, why do you think that you should be treated differently if you're doing the same job via an agency or a subcontractor or whatever. Now, the saying areas that, people have employee rights, in accordance with employment laws, and they usually relate to holidays, equality and diversity and discrimination, whistleblowing, communication, and any sort of leave, whether that be parental or sick leave. So on holidays, right? Sorry, I've said holiday, right? So there's a number of different areas that people can you can look at. Performance obviously is a big one as well. So let's just have a little look at just some key legislation that impacts on organisational policies. So the Employee Rights Act 1996, this looks at employees being treated fairly and, not being dismissed or, made redundant, unrighteously, really. And then you've got the Equality Act that looks at, 7 characteristics of and discrimination and equal pay as well. There is, obviously a direct point under the Equality Act that leads to that. And then you've got Health and Safety Act, which looks at, your working conditions and whether it's right for you to be able to, work in them conditions as well. So always consider these legislation when you're looking at answering the question, you're linking it to policy, and you're thinking about your policies and codes of conduct, and think about the links to these as well. So the next section asks about interpersonal skills and knowledge that's basically required for a manager to be able to conduct disciplinaries or follow disciplinary procedures or be able to look after staff, basically. Now, these are the key interpersonal skills that I believe that are important when considering this area of work, but you might think of others in your industry. But one of the key points I believe is active listening, being able to listen to people, that are, if people are saying, I'm not happy about this, I'm not happy about that, I'm not happy about this, then they might need just a one-to-one and a quiet word to say, why aren't you happy about it? What can we do to make you happy about it? And maybe, let's think about what we can do to move forward and have more of a positive attitude in order to be able to have more of a better morale within the team. Negotiation, persuasion, and influence and skills is obviously important when you're thinking about disciplining staff or dealing with grievances within the workplace, and that's the same for conflict resolution. But being able to make decisions confidently is also really, really important. So considering how you're going to solve problems such as performance management problems, it might be even timekeeping or just basic problems such as housekeeping in the office. Who's going to be cleaning the kitchen, who's going to be cleaning up after each other's desk, how you're going to be answering the phones, or, all of these things could lead to a discipline if people are doing it over and over again. So always consider the interpersonal skills that are needed, and specifically for the question, it asks about interpersonal skills and support. So think about how you can support staff to be better, to avoid any sort of discipline. And thinking about empathy as well, putting yourself in their shoes, because it often is the case, when I was managing a large customer service team, the job that they were actually doing, honestly, they were upsetting some of the customers that were on the phone when they were on the phone to them, and customers were irate and argumentative and abusive sometimes. So I was always empathetic because, I did that job at one point and I worked my way up the management promotional ladder. I was always empathetic towards them and how they were feeling. So, if you've just come off a call to somebody that they're being really abusive and aggressive, and then you might need to stand up and walk away from your desk and take a breather for 10 minutes. They shouldn't be disciplined for, being away from the desk longer than needed when a break time or something, for example. So making sure that you're giving them that support and saying, okay, if you have just had a bad call, move away from the situation, have a breather, come back with a positive mindset. Every call is different. It's important to have that empathy as a manager and being able to actively listen to your staff to be able to support them and motivate them to do their best. So your team is doing the best that they can, creating that positive culture and, that high morale. So just to touch on what we've been through today, always link that your policies should be linked with key legislation, codes of practice, and ACAS regulations and standards as well. Remember that every employee has rights in accordance with laws and legislations, and they have the right to put through a grievance, but managers also have the right to discipline their staff if they don't feel that they are, in accordance with their codes and their codes of practice or their performance management systems. Always remember that investigations need to happen before any sort of disciplinaries or grievances, and everybody has the right to appeal and be able to put through their side of the story, so further investigation might be able to happen as well. So if you do have any questions, you can email me directly in relation to this unit. Please bear in mind that you need to be able to demonstrate the link between laws, legislation, standards, or codes of practice. And a good way to do that is to link to the induction process when policies, I used to have an intranet system in my old workplace where if policies were updated, we needed to read them and put any signature on. So, you might be able to find any policies that you want to review through them, or you might have an employee handbook, and it might be useful for you to actually get them policies up and link them to the key legislations or codes of practice or the standards, ACAS standards. And then you can, talk through the process from there. actually providing working examples, whether that's from your current workplace, past workplaces, whether you've been involved in a disciplinary hearing as, you know, a companion or a person, or the person, you know, conducting the hearing. You can provide them examples, or provide examples of, you know, colleagues that you know that have been involved in the hearings as maybe as well. So demonstrating your understanding through working examples and past experience is really good within this unit. Thank you for taking part or watching on records. And again, if you have any questions, please contact me. Thanks again. Bye.